Welcome to Magic Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. Dominaria United takes us back to where it all began, with heroes, both old and new, facing off against one of the game's most terrifying and long-standing threats. But with so much history contained in one place, it's easy to get overwhelmed and then miss out on the important stuff. So today, I'm going to tell you exactly what happens in Dominaria United, as determined by both the official published stories found online and the story spotlight cards found within the set itself. Before we get started with that though, you need to know who the Phyrexians are. I've covered them in their own video, but if you don't have the time to watch it right now, let me give you a brief summary. The Phyrexians are a faction of mechanized nightmares. They seek to improve upon weak flesh by adding artificial parts, often resulting in horrific combinations. Worst of all, they won't stop until they've converted all life in the multiverse, which makes them an interplanar threat that cannot be reasoned with. They have attempted to invade the plane of Dominaria before, only to be stopped by the heroic efforts of the Weatherlight and her crew, which included Karn. And he's the focal point for the story of Dominaria United, as he was present for their past invasion and knows better than anyone what horrors they are truly capable of. Unfortunately, at the start of the story, nobody else believes the Phyrexians have returned to Dominaria, and so things kick off with Karn at a dig site, looking for anything that might help him in the coming conflict, in case he must face it alone. He's at the caves of Coilos, an archaeological treasure trove full of ancient Thran artifacts. Already in his possession is the Sylex, a supremely powerful magical artifact that came with no instruction manual. So Karn is digging around and he uncovers a sealed cavern that looks like it was a workshop long ago. And wouldn't you know it, inside this workshop there are tons of books and papers and even an inscribed tablet that has markings very similar to the ones on the Sylex, which could be very helpful in understanding how the thing works. Before he gets a chance to study it, however, one of his digging drones breaks through a rock wall and encounters a tunnel coated in what Karn immediately recognizes as Phyrexian oil and fibrous cables. So this proves it. The Phyrexians are on Dominaria and are also in these caves, perhaps using them as a base while they expand their influence and search for powerful relics of their own. Now, the thing about Karn is that he feels personally responsible for all of this, and so rather than retreat to seek help, he pushes further ahead into the tunnel, hoping to contain the Phyrexians here. He doesn't want to give them even a moment to expand outside these caves. Karn makes his way through the tunnel and eventually reaches a massive open cavern, which is full of Phyrexians, including Sheoldred, although she is currently in the process of being reassembled. Attending her is Rona, and Karn watches for a moment as the gruesome work of rebuilding the Praetor plays out. He decides to try and stop the invasion right here by using his powers to fabricate a small bomb. It won't be as powerful as the Sylex, but maybe in this enclosed space, it will still be good enough. Before he's able to make his attack, an alarm goes off, and with the element of surprise lost, Karn must now fight his way closer to Rona and Sheoldred. He does so, killing many Phyrexians along the way, and eventually comes face to face with Rona. He asks her why she's doing this, and she says it is Dominaria's salvation. So then Karn tosses her into a wall, and she goes limp. This gives Karn a chance to approach Sheoldred and plant his bomb, but he is suddenly paralyzed by a magical device held by Rona, who says he should have killed her when given the chance. Sheoldred, meanwhile, breaks apart into a swarm of little spider pieces and climbs all over Karn before dropping to the floor and skittering away. Rona continues to taunt the paralyzed Karn, telling him this time there will be no stopping the Phyrexians, and then she sets off a bomb of her own somewhere higher up within the cave system. Rona leaves as the whole thing collapses onto Karn, burying him in a mountain of rock. He survives, but finds he is unable to planeswalk, likely due to the interference from the crushed Thran artifacts that now surround him in his earthy tomb. Karn spends a few months like this before he is dug out by Ajani. It seems Karn's friend Joyra had been sending Karn letters asking for updates, and they were enchanted with a sort of tracking spell. When the signal from the letters stopped showing movement, Joyra knew something was wrong and sent Ajani to check on Karn. Karn is mostly embarrassed by this whole situation and frustrated at the time lost, which could have been spent preparing to battle the Phyrexians. He's also not willing to fully trust Ajani, but after talking, the two agreed the best course of action is to head to a peace summit presently happening elsewhere on the plane. It's between the Keldans and the Benalish, two forces with experience fighting the Phyrexians in the past, and they presently hold some of the largest armies on Dominaria, making them ideal allies in the coming conflict, if they can be convinced the Phyrexians have returned. A lot of big names are present for the peace talks, including Aaron Capuchin, Rada, Joda, and Jaya. Karn explains to them what he saw in the caves, but nobody wants to believe him except for a man named Sten, who quickly reminds everyone that Phyrexian sleeper agents could definitely be a thing, even though nobody has seen any mechanical nightmares out in the open just yet. Still, the diplomats decide they'd rather resolve the conflict between Benalia and Keld first and resume working on the peace talks. That is until Teferi planeswalks into the meeting room and loudly announces that the Phyrexians are back, as evidenced by what he heard about Kamigawa and Kaldheim. Everyone realizes how serious this is now, which really pushes Karn's buttons, because he's actually seen them, but Teferi just shows up and does the "I heard from a friend of a friend" bit, and everyone listens to him for some reason. The peace talks disband while everyone absorbs this news, and Karn takes this opportunity to hide his Sylex. He planeswalks over to Joyra's workshop on the mana rig and finds an empty storage closet to stash it in before returning to the site of the negotiations. He meets with the other planeswalkers to discuss their next move when he notices a bird sitting on a balcony, watching them. Karn grabs the bird and it explodes apart in a mess of cables and oil. It's a Phyrexian spy, and Karn traps it inside a cage and brings it to the assembled leaders. While everyone is looking at the captured Phyrexian creature, all hell breaks loose in the meeting room. Several of the Benalish knights who had been standing guard suddenly rip open, revealing themselves to be Phyrexian sleepers, exactly as Sten had feared. The Phyrexians snatch up Aaron and make moves towards the other leaders, but Joda is able to put up a bubble shield just in time to protect the negotiators. Jaya starts to burn things with fire, and Ajani chases the Phyrexian that already captured Aaron and jumped out a window. Rada and the Keldans retreat, but pledge to come back and fight in defense of Dominaria once they have rallied their army, and they bar the door behind them, trapping the remaining Phyrexians and Planeswalkers in the meeting room. Joda is able to open a portal, because he's basically Doctor Strange, and takes everyone present to a watchtower in the city of New Argive, at Sten's suggestion. Jaya turns the room into an oven to purge the last of the Phyrexians before stepping through the portal with everyone else, but something slips by her and makes it into the tower with them. The portal closes, and now Joda, Jaya, Karn, Teferi, and Sten are in this tower with a loose Phyrexian. They quickly activate a lockdown which seals the tower, and they agree that nobody leaves until they are sure who among them can be trusted. The trapped Phyrexian must also, of course, be destroyed before it escapes into the city and causes further mayhem. The next entire chapter of the story takes place within this sealed tower. The group splits into smaller search teams to try and find the Phyrexian. Jaya and Joda see it and try to blast it with fire, as seen on Twinferno, but the creature escapes, and tension builds. Meanwhile, Karn devises a sort of loyalty test. He starts telling the other planeswalkers privately where he hid the Sylex, since they're all eager to know. Except he tells each person a different location, and they're all lies. He regrets having to do this to his friends, but he figures it's the only way to see if a sleeper is among them. If one is, then the fake location will be immediately attacked by the Phyrexians, who of course don't want the good guys to reclaim the Sylex. So, after slowly giving out his false information, Karn tries to check in on each location with a little scrying device he developed for himself. It lets him remotely view a location or person, but he tried to use it earlier to locate the Phyrexians and found that they must have a way to block it. Which is too bad, because he could definitely use some help finding the Phyrexian thing currently climbing through the ductwork of this watchtower. At least he can continue his ruse to draw out any sleeper agents. He tells Sten, the last among them to be tested, that he has hidden the Sylex on Sarpedia. And Sten is like, finally! He bursts apart, revealing he was a sleeper agent, and turns himself into a sort of antenna to relay this information to Sheoldred, wherever she is. The planeswalkers destroy him, but realize they are still in serious trouble, because coming to this tower was Sten's idea. Which means the Phyrexians have them right where they wanted them, trapped in a tower with an elusive creature, and in a city that is also likely full of sleeper agents. With no other option, they send a signal to the skyship Weatherlight and ask for rescue. The legendary vehicle picks them up from the roof of the tower and, under Karn's direction, sets a course for the mana rig presently located in Shiv. Karn figures their best hope now is to lure the Phyrexians into open combat by putting everything they want in one place, which includes Karn himself, the Sylex, and the mana rig. The rig is an ancient Thran construct, able to fabricate power stones and Thran metal, which is stronger than steel. It's also covered in lava cannons, which all make it a great base of operations for the new coalition. First, though, they need to recruit some more allies, so on the way to the mana rig, everyone gets an assignment. Jaya seeks out Danitha Capuchin and finds her in a camp along with Ajani, who had been missing ever since that debacle back at the negotiation table. Ajani says he couldn't catch the Phyrexian who ran off with Aaron Capuchin, but did track it to some nearby caves, and now he and Danitha are going to charge in there and see if they can rescue him. Jaya agrees to help and uses her fire magic to fill the cave with smoke and force the Phyrexians out into the open. Calmly emerging from the cave is Ertai, who beckons forth Aaron, now also completed. Ertai commands Aaron to do his duty, and he lurches towards Danitha. He's able to resist long enough to tell Danitha to do her duty, and so with eyes full of tears, Danitha strikes down her Phyrexianized father. Things only get worse because next to emerge from the cave is a massive Phyrexian dreadnought. Ertai demands that Jaya and Ajani surrender themselves to him, or he'll use the dreadnought to slaughter everyone else present. But suddenly, help arrives in the form of the Golden Argosy. It's another flying ship, similar to the Weatherlight, but this one is carrying an army of Keldans, led by Radha. Radha herself leaps off the ship and begins hacking the eyes out of the dreadnought, and the fight is back on. Meanwhile, Joda heads to the forest of Yavamaya and meets with Maria, an elf who has taken an interest in old Thran technology. She is reluctant to have her forces join in the battle plan at Shiv, but as she is saying this, a dragon engine shows up, piloted by Rona. Rona is uprooting the Magnagoth trees, and Maria takes great offense at this, so she commands her archers to open fire. The dragon answers back with a powerful roar that knocks the elves to the ground, and that's when Maria notices a particular Thran artifact unearthed between the roots of the fallen trees. She asks for Joda's help in reaching it, saying it is their only hope. Together they portal over to the artifact and Maria arms it, not unlike a grenade, and then they quickly portal back out of range. The device activates and we learn it was a damping sphere, which turns the surrounding area into a vacuum. Not only can the dragon engine no longer use its devastating roar here, but it starts to fall apart as the fleshy Phyrexianized bits crumble in the airless void created by the sphere. Rona barely manages to escape, and Maria realizes hiding in the forest will not be an option. The Phyrexians are here, and it would be better to stand with allies in Shiv than to die alone in the forests of Yavamaya. This brings us to the final chapter in the main story, which opens with the Phyrexians making their assault on the mana rig itself. Karn and Teferi are already there, and Joyra is desperately racing to upgrade the rig's cannons when the Phyrexian army appears and begins climbing their way onto the rig. The cannons come online just in time to blast another Phyrexian dreadnought, which falls and crushes some nearby minions, but before anyone can celebrate, the mana rig is strafed by the Weatherlight. Teferi realizes in horror that the once proud ship has been corrupted by the Phyrexians. This happens in one of the 5 side stories, so we don't actually see it go down in this main story. And I kind of like that. If you don't read the side stories, you are just as shocked and confused as Teferi here, which is a bold literary choice, and I think it pays off. Anyway, Airtie jumps off the deck of the Weatherlight and lands in front of Karn, so that's a fun reunion. A long time ago, Airtie was basically left for dead by the original Weatherlight crew, and being completed has not helped his feelings on this matter. Before he can get too far into tearing Karn apart, however, the Golden Argosy arrives once again with heroic timing. Ajani jumps from its deck onto the mana rig and tosses Airtie overboard. I would like to pause here briefly and use my very expensive degree in communications to communicate to you that this is, in effect, foreshadowing an event that will soon happen in this story. But first, Karn tells Ajani they must protect Joyra's workshop as it contains the Sylex. Meanwhile, Radha and Danatha disembark from the Argosy and join the fight, giving the new coalition a glimmer of hope. Even Jaya is there, making quips and showing off a few tricks she's learned over her years by tossing a lightning strike up in the mix. The Phyrexians are relentless, though, and they continue to swarm over the mana rig, with Sheoldred herself leading the charge. Karn asks Jaya to retrieve the Sylex and planeswalk away with it before it can fall into Sheoldred's hands? Claws? Tendrils? Whatever. Then Joda shows up along with the elves of Yavamaya, riding atop massive treefolk, who stomp the Phyrexians into the ground, but even that might not be enough. Jaya returns from the workshop holding the Sylex, but it is still wrapped in a protective case, making it too heavy for her to planeswalk with. Karn dissolves the case, as only he can, and that's when things get bad. Ajani's skin rips apart, revealing an improved Phyrexian body beneath, and he plunges his axe into Jaya. She falls to the ground and tries to summon a wall of fire to protect herself, but Ajani effortlessly hoists her up and tosses her over the rail of the mana rig. Turning with his cat-like speed, Ajani then picks up the exposed Sylex and crushes it with his enhanced Phyrexian strength. Teferi, Karn, and Joda all stand there with stun counters on them as Sheoldred climbs onto the deck to gloat. She tells Karn that this has gone even better than she had hoped. She has removed the threat of the Sylex, conquered the mana rig, and has captured Karn, who is now gripped tightly by a Johnny. The Praetor goes on to say she has great plans for him, for Dominaria, and for the multiverse. But before she can tell anyone what those plans are, Joyra arms the self-destruct on the mana rig, and Joda quickly opens enough portals for the Coalition troops to escape the impending kaboom. Sheoldred doesn't seem to care, as she still believes she has the greatest prize of them all in Karn. The planar bridge opens, and she steps through, along with a Johnny, who still has his death grip on Karn. And so the Praetor and her trophies escape before the mana rig can claim them in its fireball. Things start to wrap up. The surviving members of the new coalition fight off the remaining Phyrexian army, but in the aftermath, the mood is grim. They know more Phyrexians are out there, and now, without Karn, without the Sylex, and without the mana rig, they will be at a huge disadvantage for the rest of this war. But even so, a plan forms. The planeswalker Saheeli arrives and works with Teferi. Using her artistry, she's able to create a replica of the Sylex based on Karn's surviving notes. The problem is, they only know when the original Sylex was last used. They still don't know how it is activated. Which leaves Teferi about to do the one thing he's promised to never do: cross time itself. He's going to go back to the era of the Brothers' War and see if he can learn how the Sylex was first used against the Phyrexians. Then bring that knowledge back to the present, in the hopes it will give them at least something they can use against them now. The final scene takes place on New Phyrexia, with Karn face to face with Elesh Norn. He sees a small tree growing from a floor of white sand. Karn asks what it is, and Elesh Norn replies, "It is the beginning of great things, Father. It is the beginning of everything." And that's it. That's what happens in Dominaria United. To recap, Karn searches for clues in the caves of Coilos, only to discover Phyrexians, including Sheoldred, have already reached the plane of Dominaria. His warnings fall on deaf ears until a live specimen is captured and presented to a group of gathered negotiators from various regions. Some of those very negotiators end up being sleeper agents, and the heroes of our story narrowly escape to a locked-down watchtower where Karn must test their loyalty in order to decide who, among them, can be trusted. Help arrives in the form of the Weatherlight, which takes Karn and his allies to join Joyra on the mana rig up in Shiv, and alliances are forged along the way. The Phyrexians take the bait and attack the mana rig, successfully destroying the Sylex and the rig itself, and then capturing Karn with the help of their sleeper agent, Ajani. Sheoldred absconds with Karn, and Teferi plans to travel backwards in time in a desperate search for the key to unlocking their best remaining weapon, a life-crafted duplicate of Karn's Sylex. Wow, what a trip! Obviously there was a lot I could not cover, even in a video this huge, so I'm sure you still have some questions. I'm going to attempt to preemptively answer them in a little segment I like to call Mustache Minute. Ready? Here we go. Why didn't Jaya planeswalk away when she was thrown overboard? Well, she had just been hit with Ajani's axe, and planeswalking takes effort and focus. She had been fighting for her life against the Phyrexians all day, and just didn't have it left in her at that point. How do we know Jaya is really dead? Well, they find her corpse and recover some items from it. Joda even clips a lock of her white hair. They give her a full burial, and they build a massive monument for her on Shiv. So I think it's pretty official. Why doesn't Karn planeswalk away from Elesh Norn and back to Dominaria? Well, the story makes it pretty clear he does try, but he finds himself depleted. He cannot muster the energy or focus necessary, and so for the time being, he is stuck where he is. When did Ajani become a sleeper agent? Well, it is not spelled out for us. We can only look at clues that are woven throughout the story. For example, they take pains early on to explain that Leonin, such as himself, see open-mouthed smiles as a challenge. But later on, he gives one to Jaya, suggesting something within him had changed. However, it is also clear that Ajani did not know he was a sleeper agent himself until his own skin burst open for the big reveal. His last free act was to look surprised and horrified at the transformation as it happened, which means the earlier toothy grin thing was intentional? We should also note he was slicing up Phyrexians and even rescued Karn from Airtie right up until the last moment, so I'm not sure we can use a lot of his behavior as any sort of clue. That said, it seems most likely he was somehow captured and converted after the Peace Summit when he was separated from everyone else in his pursuit of Aaron Capuchin. And that is scary because it means other planeswalkers can be completed much easier than we had originally been shown. With Tamiyo, it was a whole big process done in a lab, but with Ajani, it might have just been exposure to a few drops of oil in his travels. The story was full of small moments that I liked. During the battle on the mana rig, Karn's joints start to freeze up and get clogged with gore, so he can't make his hands into fists anymore. So he starts squashing Phyrexians between his open palms, like the world's best game of patty cake. Other moments I liked. Teferi apologized to Karn for treating him so poorly all those years ago. That was touching. Jaya was grumpy without her morning coffee, and Karn and Ajani couldn't sympathize with that because caffeine is not a thing they understand. One confusing thing, though, back at the beginning, when Karn finds Sheoldred, she tells him Phyrexia has big plans for you, but then they trigger the cave-in to cover their own escape. How did they know that that wouldn't destroy him? I don't know. Oh, and the Golden Argosy clearly flies in the story, but its card does not. For being a story about Karn, I think the spotlight cards show a little bit too much Jaya, especially with things like Temporal Firestorm, where she teams up with Teferi. That one doesn't explicitly happen in the story, but I guess it might have been in the background on the mana rig or something. And with the plot being centered on Karn and the characters he meets, we end up with a ton of legendary characters who got cards, but never appeared anywhere in the story. Some of them do pop up in side stories, which I'll cover another time, but I will quickly address Liliana, because she's a planeswalker and a pretty major character. She is not part of the main story. Instead, she has her own side story in which she briefly returns to Dominaria to investigate something involving the Raven Man, but she is not present for any of the conflict with the Phyrexians. My favorite part of the whole thing was probably the chapter in the tower. It had a good bit of body horror as this lone Phyrexian kept ripping itself apart and slipping away from the heroes, and Karn had to come up with his clever ploy of telling everyone a different lie to see who he could really trust. If that was the high point, then the death of Jaya was probably the low. Not that I mind major characters dying. I think it's good for keeping the story dangerous. It just felt like a cliche, man. You know, the old cop, 1 week away from retirement. You know how it goes. But what do you think? Does Dominaria United set us up for a Phyrexian arc the way Wizards of the Coast is hoping? And do the story spotlight cards do a good job telling everything important that happened in this story? Let me know down in the comments, and then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya!